We're making a list. We're checking it twice. We got to find out if that's an herb or a spice, because it's time for us to figure out how we're going to organize our magical lives. And that's easiest to do with a grimoire. And there are a lot of ways to do a grimoire. I do mine very differently now than when I did when I was younger, back in the 90s, during the time of the Lisa Franks. And yes, my first grimoire was a Lisa Frank notebook. Yeah, we're going to have a long and fun discussion about this today. We're going to give ourselves a gift. We're going to make a grimoire, maybe for the first time, maybe just starting fresh for the new year. Let's talk about it as we walk together down Creation's paths. Hello, everybody. My name is Charlie. I am a Christopagan druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I am a mischief maker.
And no, we have not been making merry, but we've been talking about it a lot. Oh, my goodness. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about grimoire making and the various ways that you do that, including how I kind of do mine now, which is, like I said, very different from the way it used to be. So if this is something that you feel is kind of old hat, maybe stick around for a little bit, because I have some ideas that I want to share with you about how my grimoire practice has changed over the years. And as somebody who's been doing this for, okay, we're fine. I'm not going to say how many years, but since the 90s, oh, I feel so old every time I think about it. I've grown and matured and changed in the way that I view my personal grimoire over that time. But before we get into it, if you haven't already, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, follow button, whatever it's called, on whatever app you happen to be listening to us on. We do original Christopagan and Druid content 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and you don't want to miss a thing. So we got a lot of fun stuff coming up. All right, let's get into it.
What is a grimoire?
A grimoire is an abecedary. And this is a word that we don't use anymore that I absolutely love.
A, B, C?
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually, I believe it's spelled A-B-E-C-E-D-A-R-Y, I think. It's an Old English word for a primer, a book that you give somebody. And I love the word abecedary. Like, I don't know why we stopped using this word. It is so much fun to say, but I also collect books of lost English words, and it's just great. So a grimoire literally comes from the word grammary, like, grammar, like you learned in school. It is a primer, and most grimoires are just that. If you buy a classical grimoire, that's what you're buying. It's hi, so you want to learn Solomonic magic. So you want to learn the Armadal. So you want to learn how to do the secret magic of Pope Honorius. Yeah, they're instructional books when you buy them.
So a grimoire is not a magical journal?
They are now. See, a thing changed. There's a huge difference in the grimoire tradition when it comes to Europe and the rest of the world. Because so much magic is very Eurocentric, we don't acknowledge those differences as often as we should. So in Europe, magic was outlawed for a very long time. So the practice of magic was very secret and secretive. You had these weird groups of people that were passing around manuscripts, very handwritten. Even after the time of the printing press, most grimoires were still copied by hand, and they're a hot mess. European grimoires are trash, and anybody who tells you otherwise has not really studied European grimoires. And they're not trash because they're bad, they're trash because they weren't copied well. When we talk about copyist errors, which do happen from time to time because you think you know how a word's spelled and you don't know how the word's spelled, and you see the word, and even though it's spelled correctly in the original, you know how it's spelled, so you don't check when you write it down. Copyist errors like that happen all the time. Sometimes people will rewrite passages because they feel like they know a better way to phrase something. And then there's European magical grimoires where they're like, oh, look at all these pretty squiggles. I like drawing pictures. I draw a picture too. And they just don't know that that's Hebrew, Greek sometimes, but usually Hebrew. And so by the time you get to the 1800s, there are all these really pretty magical squiggles all over the grimoires. And if you trace the lineage back, the oldest versions of those grimoires, those were Hebrew words and phrases. This is what the tradition is. They're very secretive because, again, you could get in trouble for having them, even though I do want to point out, Cotton Mather had a lot of necromantic grimoires and treasure finding grimoires. And I'm not saying that the witch hunter general of Massachusetts who, presided over the Salem witch trials was himself a necromancer, but there's at least some evidence that he studied necromancy in his free time.
Put him in the chair, turn the lamp on, aim it at his head. Why do you have so many necromantic grimoires?
Just lay him down and slowly add stones to his chest until he decides to explain why he had so many necromancy books. Got a question for you, Mr. Mathers.
So you said you're just studying them. Is that not studies in practice?
Yeah, what were you doing with those treasure hunting magic books? Were you just, seeking to hunt down bad people that were ripping people off, or were you looking for treasure in your free time, like it looks like you probably were?
Yeah.
Yeah, all kinds of questions. But because of that, there's this broken lineage in these traditions. When you go outside of Europe, almost every grimoire starts with, so I got a copy of this, personal name, got a copy of this from personal name, who got their copy from personal name, who got their copy from, and a long list of the history of the grimoire, how it was passed down. And so I wrote the original in black ink. They had annotated it, so I'm writing their annotations in red ink. I will put my annotations in blue ink. There's a whole lineage. A lot of times they're not as specific as that, but there's a whole lineage so that you can see this transmission over time and how people use them to grow and develop, but allowed the tradition to change. So something weird happens with a man that occultists that do not like acknowledging the existence of, and that's Gerald Gardner. I don't know why people want to ignore Gerald Gardner other than they have what I call the Wiccan ick, where they just, I would think about it, there's this weird thing where, ew, Wicca. He's one of those people that up there with Aleister Crowley and Peter Carroll and Dion Fortune and Moyna Mathers, not McGregor. Anyway, that's a whole story in and of itself, who really helps to shape modern magic and occultism to be what it is today. And part of that was the Book of Shadows, which was a personal grimoire, as well as the grimoire of the tradition. So there was the grimoire in the old sense that would be handed down, and part of your studies in Wicca would be to hand copy your own version of that grimoire. But you would also write in your notes, your commentaries, your ideas, and it would grow and develop from there. And that Book of Shadows tradition really does influence our modern idea of what a grimoire is. We also have a kind of an argument today of, I have a grimoire and a Book of Shadows, and here's the differences between them. And that's great. I love semantics. Semantics are magic. I really don't care the term that you use. When I'm talking about a grimoire, I'm talking about if I wanted to teach somebody else my magic, I would give them this book because these are all of my notes. It may not be clear enough for them to understand. And trust me, a lot of even classical grimoires are not pick up any of John Dee's grimoires.
They were intentionally incomplete. Where do you think chefs learn this practice?
Yeah.
In their recipes, where they would intentionally leave out stuff. And it's not even intentional sometimes in the sense of commission, but omission, just because
Everybody
knows certain parts, like everybody casts a circle. So we don't put that at the beginning of the ritual because you're expected to have done that, or some kind of cleansing process, maybe, for instance, like in a chef's recipe, like they may just assume seasoning.
When you start studying the Enochian magic, for example, there are all of these tables of letters, and that's because there was a really butchered text that probably was originally written in either Greek or Hebrew, but then transliterated. In other words, they didn't change the words, but they changed the letters into the Latin script. And then because it was illegible, over time, the letters got changed in it so that it was no longer even recognizable as a transliterated text that by the time of John Dee, everybody thought was a magical scrying board, basically. Like all knowledge of the universe is encoded in this magical square of text. And so that's why it is one included in his own work. He made his own version of it because he was able to buy, I think, 5 copies of the original and found that they were different and tried to reason his way to the pure and correct one. And then, of course, when he's dealing with the angels reveal more of these to him. And this was just the tradition at the time. If you don't know that and you get to these books for the first time and you're like, so page 1, wow, that's a lot of just random letters just written here. Because again, if you practiced magic at that time, you knew all about this practice and you knew how to use it. You knew the various techniques to pull various ideas and words out of it. You knew various ways to use it. He doesn't feel the need to write any of that down because again, it's the common knowledge. So what does this have to do with our grimoires? I think if you are writing, if you're doing magic at all, you need to be crafting in some way, shape, or form your own grimoire. Because as I like to say, and I'm sorry for the flowery language here, but correspondences are bullshit. And I mean that quite literally sometimes, that somebody just wrote a book and said, this is related to the moon. And because they needed to fill out a correspondence table. And that happened a lot in modern magical texts. Sometimes it's from unverified personal gnosis. Sometimes it is from tradition. Like when we talk about rosemary being used for cleansing, we can find Greek magical papyri going back to the turn of the era from BCE to CE, where people are talking about burning rosemary to cleanse the space. So that is clearly part of the tradition going back. But again, somebody made that up at some point. Somebody found that that worked at some point. And what you're going to learn, as we talk about a lot on this podcast, is your magical tradition is your magical tradition. Correspondences might not work for you. If the correspondences that you're trying to call on are all citrus-based and you have a citrus allergy, you know what? Maybe having all those oranges around you is not going to bring you the prosperity that you're looking for or that solar healing energy that you're looking for because you're allergic to citrus. So you're going to have to find your own correspondences there. And you also might be much more moon-based, and so using solar correspondences aren't going to help you because you are much more lunar in the powers that you call upon. So you're going to need to test all of the correspondences that anybody tells you and find out what that means for you. Because I can tell you what this author, that author, and the other author says amethyst is good for. I know what I use amethyst for, ritualistically speaking, and tangentially related. But I've also found other things where it works really well for me to use in that stead. And that's a lot of what you need to be putting in your grimoire. Anytime you find something that clicks with you, that works for you, you need to write that down. Because, and we say this a lot, the biggest problem with humans is we are forgetful. If you're not documenting, you're going to forget and be in a place of, what was it I did in my Yule ritual last year that worked so well? If you have it written down, you know. The other reason you want to keep a grimoire is because you need to make sure you're not wasting your time and energy on magic that doesn't work. You need to be making all of your magic actionable. In other words, it's something that you can see the effect of. If it's just, I will feel better. Well, what does that mean? I mean, it's not bad to do a feel better spell, but feel better is such a nebulous term. I will have less anxiety. Still nebulous, but a little bit better. Maybe try for an anxiety-free day or a certain amount of time. Be as specific as you can in your magic so that you can do what magic is, and that's experimentation with subtle energies. You need to be documenting like you would as a scientist. Remember back to your science class, because science is derivative from magic. I'm going to keep repeating that until people get it through their heads. You need to be documenting what you're doing and whether or not it worked. If you're not doing the second half of that, you're not going to improve your magic. So that's what a grimoire is. Yes, you're going to copy out from other people's work. So here's a correspondence table, all of the Celtic tree magic, which probably came from Robert Graves. And I will let you know right now, Robert Graves pulled all of that out of his butt. All of it. We cannot find any hint in the lore anywhere unless he had access to the sole copy of some ancient book that we have completely lost. He pulled it all just out of thin air. Yet it has become the basis of a lot of how people see an oak or an ash or a mulberry or a maple is based off of his work. And that is not uncommon. The 15th to the 17th century, a lot of people claimed, I have access to the secret knowledge. This is where you have the Gospel of the Witches getting written, which is a beautiful book. It is an interesting book. There are no historical antecedents to it. There's no evidence of it going back any further. This is where we have our problematic fave, Yolo Morgana, write a lot of stuff that, yes, some of it you can trace back to the lore, some of it you can't. But I think the biggest difference with Yolo Morgana and some of the others is he was so good, he actually forged the Middle and Old Welsh for them, which makes discovering his forgeries really hard to do because he Tolkiened his forgeries. I mean, he went back like he knew the language inside and out, and all the words he constructed have a lineage and a history in real Welsh.
You give him credit, at least for the amount of effort. This isn't like some of the others where you feel like they just sat down on a Saturday afternoon and quickly pounded out a bunch of it and just went, published, done.
And my issue with him is it is hard to know how much of his work is actually forgery or how much of it is his unverified personal gnosis that he wrote down.
Yeah.
And
you almost get to feel like there was research and then there was embellishment to fill in the gaps.
yeah, when you read the Barthas, there is so much in there that is beautiful, that is wonderful. The runes in the Barthas are beautiful, and I love them. The Kolbrin are beautiful and wonderful. They have no historical basis whatsoever. He made them up out of whole cloth, but one of the best divinatory systems I've ever practiced and used. Did he practice and use it? Did he make it up for no reason? Was he inspired by what was going on in Scandinavia with the runes there? Did he happen to find a Viking thing at a Welsh camp and make a story about it? Maybe. Was this something that came out of his practice? We don't know. But part of your grimoire practice would be, okay, I'm curious about his Kolbrin runes, for example. So you write it down, you put it in. And here's where magic becomes very personalized in some ways, especially with a lot of modern magic, when you know that its ancient roots are kind of BS. I don't have to be precious with him because he talks about building this contraption, which one of these days I'm going to sit down with Brian. We're actually going to build the contraption because I just want to see if it's a functioning contraption. Like I want to see with my own eyes how this monstrosity of a letterboard would actually work, because he gives detailed instructions on how to make it, right? Have I made that board? No. Because again, it's a lot of work and effort, and I feel like I need to have some faith that the runes are useful before I put it in the work. So yeah, I kind of skip over that section. Looked at, I've used rune casting before. I've used other kinds of divinatory systems before, but all of his correspondences of this rune has this meaning and it's used for this purpose, wrote all that down, and then learned and developed a relationship with each of those symbols and what do they mean. And of course, being as honest as you can with this. I would never say that these runes are ancient or, well, I guess depending on ancient. Like he wrote this like 300 and some years ago. So these runes are older than the country I'm living in. Where do you cut the line at something being ancient or not?
By Roman standards, does not qualify.
By Star Trek standards, it does.
But yeah.
You hear them talking about ancient Earth stuff, and it's stuff that would be like 300 to 400 years prior to them. So
yeah,
it depends on where you carve that line. But this is the gift that you give yourself, because I don't want to have to hunt down a copy of the Barthas or any of the other writers that have written about these runes. I want to collate all that information together, and I want that information to grow and develop. And so you may end up making for yourself more than one grimoire. You may have your runes grimoire and your correspondences and your herb lore. And that's fine. That's fine. There are many ways to construct a journal, and they're wonderful. I have an entire library of journals that I have used for years. They're wonderful. I use Obsidian now. Obsidian is a free app that you can get that lets you really customize it how you want. You can tag it. You can do all kinds of things so that you can find it. I moved all of this over into a digital format for me. And I haven't published everything, but I published a lot of it over at Wisdom's Cry. So anytime you hear me talk about Wisdom's Cry, a lot of that is essays and articles that I've written over the years. Parts of that are from my own personal grimoire, because you can select what parts of it you want to publish. More and more of it I've been publishing over there. I do not believe you have to handwrite your grimoire. If you want to use the Notes app on your phone, use the Notes app on your phone. You are not writing a sacred text. Though in some traditions, especially Wicca, you are. The Book of Shadows is kind of a sacred text that is generationally constructed.
I think some of this goes into the intention going into what you're doing. So if you're doing a grimoire, if this is your practice grimoire, not as in I'm trying to do a grimoire, but as in I'm doing practice, this is the working grimoire, then definitely not a secret.
Yeah.
Stuff needs to be written in temporary format because you're going to try things, you're going to find results, and you're going to change stuff, and it's going to be made better, hopefully. The whole part of this is making better. If this is your grimoire that you're writing to pass down to the next, like if you feel you've gotten to a point of complete in the sense that I'm complete and I'm ready to pass this on to teach another, that's almost like more that Book of Shadows type grimoire teaching one. I don't know, like we almost need better language for it.
And that to me is the problem. I don't like the word Book of Shadows.
Yeah. I think of Charmed. I think of Charmed every time I hear it. Oh, wonderful fun show. But I'm like, oh, the power of three, Book of Shadows. Like,
Yeah, because that's Wicca.
yeah.
They're drawing very heavily on some ideas from Wicca there, though the relationship between Charmed and actual magic is non-existent.
No, they have a lot of fun with various mythologies and whatnot.
But if you are handwriting, you will find yourself copying old grimoire text into new ones. You'll find yourself scratching stuff out. If you've never scratched something out in your grimoire, I don't know that you're using it right. Because like I said, again, yes, we're copying these things and we're learning, oh, these are things that mint is good for. And yes, they're all of the traditional things. But science is telling us a lot of other things that we know that mint is good for, and just personal use. I know certain things that it has really helped me with over the years. And so that has made it into more of my things. Europe had no rooibos tradition because it's not a European plant. I have found rooibos to be a very interesting plant to work with in my own herbalism and in my own practice, and something that I found very helpful for me in a lot of ways, and have started developing my own correspondences to it, right? And I feel that way about other herbs and spices that I've encountered over the years. Like I'm starting to develop a weird thing about asafoetida, because I don't know if it's because it's so special that we don't have it that often, but it seems to have a very strong connection to both prosperity and happiness for me. And that's probably just a simple, I love it so much that when I have it, I'm happy, because I don't have it very often, right? But that's how correspondences get started, is you start noticing this correlation between this and that. And that's why these are correspondences. They are correlations. They tend to go together. I would say very few correspondences actually relate to definitely happen, right? But we did a ritual for prosperity and well-being coming into the house, and a little ways later, I ended up getting an unexpected commission to do some stuff. He ended up getting a job that seems to be related. But like we've said before, if you're not also putting the work in, there's nothing for the magic to hold on to. So I actually wasn't seeking a job. I was giving somebody advice because they were looking to hire somebody to do a thing that they knew that I had done in the past. And they were asking, are they overcharging me? I said, yes, these are the rates that I used to charge. And they were like, fine, you're hired. And then I had to ask myself, oh, am I taking a commission? Right? I wasn't auditioning for one, at least knowingly. They may have been auditioning me for one, but that's not the question I was sent, right? So did the cinnamon that we used in that ritual bring prosperity in? Maybe. It was part of the ritual. It was part of the work. And so cinnamon still gets that check on the list for me, that when I'm doing prosperity magic, it's one of the things that I'm going to still include. But there were other aspects of that ritual too that also get checked, because again, the ritual worked. And that's what we record in our grimoires. And that's why this really is the gift for us. I think one of the biggest problems that we have today, especially with the TikTokification and the YouTubeification of magic, is you can spend all day watching 20, 30, 40 tutorials on how to do a prosperity spell or magical self-care or what have you. But you have to actually do the rituals. You have to do the magic. And you need to start asking yourself, how does that work for you, right? Are these oils that they're using for anti-anxiety actually working? Well, I'm very sensitive to smell and very sensitive to lavender. Like a lot of these rituals have lavender in them. Good reason. Lavender has been scientifically proven to help with relaxation. A little bit of lavender goes a really long way for me, and a lot of lavender can make me sick. So I have to be very careful. That's my personal correspondences to that, right? You may not be sensitive to lavender at all and use a whole bunch of it and feel nothing. We need to know that then. What does actually relax you? What does actually calm you down? What actually helps you get into that state? This is learned through, again, that trial and error that we're recording in our grimoire. This is the other reason why I like doing it digitally, because going through 20 pages of notes of I tried this and then I tried that and I tried this and I tried that is a lot, when I can just go through and edit the note so that I can sit back and go, oh, this is what worked and this didn't work, so I'm just going to delete it. This has never worked.
And mark it through, and then you
Yeah.
can put it down in the tried and failed section, so that inevitably I'll forget that I tried something and it failed, and later on I'll be like, oh, I had a nifty idea. Something I thought of 5 years ago that I'm thinking of again, but I already tried and failed. If I have it just struck through, I can see, oh, I already tried that. It failed. Okay, cool. I will skip that.
Which is a lot easier, again, than
Doing digitally, then, yeah, because if you handwrite it, then really when you're thinking of handwriting it, just have in mind, you'll probably be having version 1, version 2, version 3.
you will be handwriting.
You're rewriting it
I have
basically over and over again.
I have burned many grimoires over the years because I copied everything relevant into the new one and wanted to make sure, because it was so habitual for me to pick up the old one
Yeah, you want to make sure you didn't.
and I had already extracted all of the stuff I needed from it, and I didn't need it anymore. So into the fire. That's the other question. What do you do with your old one?
That's Larry's thought of where maybe if you wanted to save it, you could sew it shut. And then could you imagine some archaeologists coming across a stack of grimoires that are sewn shut? They're like, it's so sacred. It was sealed.
Oh, yeah.
And making all these errant interpretations of, no, I sewed it shut so I wouldn't accidentally open it and read it because it was an older version. But I didn't want to get rid of it.
If you want to do yours by hand, do yours by hand. There are wonderful tutorials for that. I do think that you will probably, if you are going to be doing it by hand, have a digital working one. And then once you know what you want on the page, copy it over. I would look at some of the more traditional techniques for journal keeping that were used back in the day, like a daybook. Those are very, very handy. They actually had tabs for different sections in them so that you knew where you were going to write in your various quotes and stuff, so that it had a pre-order kind of imposed on the book. A lot of different ways that you can do that, but do it. If you're not doing this as part of your practice, and even if you're like, well, I don't do magic, if you pray, because my grimoire practice technically started when I was in elementary school, if we want to be technical, because for us to see, I went to a Christian elementary school when I was a kid, and so that we could see the good works of the Lord, we were told to keep a prayer journal. And we had to bring it into school and show that we were keeping it. Like, they didn't read it or anything, but we had to show that we had stuff in there, and they made sure we hadn't just squiggled in it, that we actually wrote words. But we were supposed to write our prayers and then leave a space at the bottom of the page so that we could write down when the prayers were answered. That is a grimoire. I hate to break it to anybody, that is a grimoire. But if you're just doing prayer and petition, which is petitioning magic, it is deity work. But if you were just doing prayer, you should still keep one, because you may find that there are more auspicious days than others. I've been researching the continental Celtic calendar for a while, and they broke the month up into 2 fortnights of 15 days. They had labeled specific for each month, auspicious and inauspicious days. And unfortunately, we only have one copy of this calendar, so we don't know if those moved every year or what. And I've been trying. I, like a lot of people, have been trying to reverse engineer this, just because, not that I necessarily want to use it or I believe that it worked like that, just more, how did they come up with this? You might actually learn, like I have over the years, Fridays the 13th are lucky for me. New moons are my best day of the month. Full moons are my worst day of the month. Almost invariably, this is what I learned through both a journaling and a grimoire practice. And they do go hand in hand, but they are separate. If you are keeping a magical journal where you're literally journaling, that should be separate from your grimoire. Your grimoire should be thought of more like a scientific magical notebook where you're recording experiments and results, cataloging your findings. Yeah, it's a wonderful practice to do if it's one that you have not done yourself, because I know we have a lot of listeners who are new to magic and are just dipping their toes in. This is how you test and see, because one, you have to find the magic that works for you. Are you into pendulums? Are you an intuitive witch? Are you going to be doing chaos magic? Or is it sigils? Is it candles? because we all kind of have a form of magic that aligns with our energies best, that helps us to focus best. And you have to learn that first. So if every time you do a sigil, you get results, but every time you light a candle, you don't, that's very valuable to know, because then stop wasting your money on the candles unless you like them for the ambiance. But you don't have to stress about it as much, because now you know the candles are there for ambiance. It's the sigil that you're getting your effects from. So focus in on your sigil practice. That's really why we do this. It is a wonderful gift to give yourself. And hopefully you're already doing it. And if not, get started. If you want more practical tips, or if you have any specific questions about how to construct a grimoire, let us know. If you're listening to us on Spotify or YouTube, you can leave a comment right there and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say that you can leave a comment there, they won't let us know, so we won't know that you did it. But leave a comment there, because engagement is magic, and then head over to creationspaths.com, click on chat, and there you can leave us a comment. We will see it and be able to get back to you on it. I would love to know what your questions are, because I see a lot of content on there on grimoires, and I don't know, maybe I've been into the craft for too long. I don't see the usefulness in them, but maybe they are stuff that are useful to newer people in the craft. So let me know what you think. If you used grimoires for years, are you digital, physical, hybrid? I would love to know. While you're over at Creations Pass, if you haven't have a few dollars you can pass our way, you can think about joining the membership. And thank you to our new member. We got a new annual member the other day. Thank you so very, very much. That really does help us out a lot. If you have the money to help, really does help us out a lot. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I have CE Dorset on both. Ko-fi is one of the best places to support us, because one, you can do one-time donations, and two, more of the gift does go directly to us. We are looking at starting a fourth wall. We've been talking about it quite a bit, because I don't necessarily want to sell merch, but I kind of want a better is better t-shirt for the other slogans. So kind of thinking about doing it so I can buy stuff for myself. I don't know. It's a problem, y'all. Let me know what y'all think about that too. But that money really does help us keep the lights on, keep a roof over our heads, and food on our table. Thank you so much to everybody who helps. And if you don't have any money, but you want to help us out anyway, share what we're doing. It really does help a lot. We're doing this for the love of it. We really want to get the word out to people and help improve as many lives as we can. And getting out there and sharing this with people really does help us out a lot. So I'm going to do something some people might find a little weird at the end here, so we like to end with prayer. And so I was going to invoke the Scribe of Heaven, because since we were talking about writing our grimoires. So, most holy Metatron, who is said to be so large that the cosmos cannot contain him, who sees all and writes all and records it all in the book of life, help us to write our own book of life, so that we may find the things that make our lives better and the things that make our lives worse, and know which path that we should take. Help us in all that we do. Amen.
Amen.